Perfectionism ruined my art. It cost me 2 years, multiple opportunities, my mental health, and a whole lot more. In this video, we're going to look at where I went wrong and how I ultimately got over perfectionism and insecurity when it comes to creating and making art. Honestly, making this video and reflecting back was kind of sad because it made me realize just how much of an effect this had on me and how much it slowed me down and how much sort of needless suffering was caused by it. So I hope that this video can serve as a kind of warning sign for you to not do the same thing, avoid the traps I fell into, and at least if you have fallen into those traps, find a way out. So let's get into it. So at this point in my art journey, I dropped out of college to learn how to draw and paint. I'd done about a year of that, got some good results, and I spent another year learning to draw on top of that as well. And at this point, I was starting to learn how to paint, and I figured now is a good time to try and put myself out there and start sharing some work, maybe selling a little bit. And I felt pretty nervous to do so, which I think is normal. It's always kind of nerve-wracking sharing the stuff you create for the first time. And I was really nervous about kind of working and putting my stuff out there and people seeing it. So I thought a good kind of compromise would be to do it under a fake name. Give myself a little bit of distance, hey, that's someone else. I thought it was a nice little workaround. So I opened up an Instagram account under a fake name and I started posting. I was really nervous and I just thought this will go away with time, and I was continuing to get better at painting, and I did this painting here which I really like, and I was feeling pretty good even though the nerves were still there. I just thought, they're gonna settle, it's all gonna be fine. And while I was still nervous to share my work, I did also find it kind of exciting at points. It was really cool when people really enjoyed what you were doing, so that part was fun, even although I still found the whole thing pretty nerve-wracking. But it got to the point where I started to feel, used to it enough, used to sharing my work, that I started to put it up on some online art stores and places like eBay to try and sell some of it as well. And I sold a few pieces here and there. Nothing crazy. I think the most I got in this period was £130 for one painting. Most of it was all really cheap, but it was still cool to be putting some stuff out there and selling bits here and there. It was nice. It felt like some progress. But as I sold more and started to grow a very small following, like 200 people, I started to feel a little bit more nervous, which was weird. I thought I would feel less, but I actually started to feel more. I started to feel this kind of pressure that I was putting on myself. And there was this pressure to kind of outperform what I did last time, to make it better than the last one, to make sure it wasn't worse than the last one. I just felt this kind of bearing down on me just a little bit. And I thought this would just go away over time, so I kind of ignored it and just kept showing up and posting more. But as I did this, it just started to get worse and worse, and I found myself in this situation where I was actually really scared to share and post stuff because I was afraid of what other people would think. I was afraid, that's not as good as the last one, maybe I should wait until the next thing I do, which is better to post it. And I got stuck in this loop. So I thought, I've got a great idea. I started a new account with a different name the first time and that got me posting. Let's do that again. So I opened up a new Instagram account under the name of Wink, which if you've been following me for a while, you'll probably know me as that name originally. That's what I worked under for several years. And I started on this Instagram account and I was like, this is going to be the fix. It worked last time, it's going to work this time. It didn't. While it worked a little bit in the beginning, those first few posts felt a little bit lighter to do, I guess. Really, it kind of just went straight back to the way it was. But rather than stopping and thinking, there's something going on here I need to address, the way I perceived it was, I just need to get better at creating art. That's the problem, that my stuff isn't good enough. There's not something else going on here. It's not that I'm having, trouble sharing it or there's some kind of internal thing happening. It's just that I'm not good enough at this yet. So I just kept on pushing. And as I kept on pushing, I kept on applying more and more pressure on myself to do something good. And this just continued to build. And there was a point that I crossed where things really started to change, where as I started to make a mistake, it would actually hurt. It would be emotionally painful when I made a mistake. And while when I first started drawing, it was all a bit painful because I just sucked and I wasn't used to discipline or anything like that, this was very kind of new, because when I would make a mistake, I would feel bad. I would feel like I'd done something really wrong as a person. And this was when things really started to get really negative. And I remember around this time as well, I sold a couple of paintings on eBay, and it turned out the person who bought them was an artist. She'd taken them to like a framer, and the framer loved them as well, and the framer was like, this artist, they should be like in a gallery or something. And the person who bought my work was like, yeah, I agree. So they sent me a message on eBay and was like, we really love your work. Our framer agrees. They were jealous. They wish they had it. I'm an artist too. I know some galleries. I can give you a foot in. Here's the link to this like gallery. There's a show coming up. It's a group exhibition. Tell them I got in touch with you. On you go. So I had this like really good, just out of the blue, out of nowhere kind of like lead into a gallery. And guess what? I never spoke to her. And I never got in touch with the gallery either, because at this point I would sort of internalize so much that I just wasn't good enough to do it, that I just let that opportunity pass me by. And I was actually so kind of deeply in this that I didn't even tell anyone that I even got offered that opportunity. I don't even think I've told anyone ever. This might be the first time I've ever told anybody that someone even made that offer to me, because I was just so kind of, by this point, enmeshed in this idea that I simply wasn't good enough for it to work. So again, my great takeaway from all this was that I just needed to learn more. That's why I didn't take up that opportunity, was because, I'm just not good enough yet. So while I was mostly self-motivated throughout my kind of art learning journey, I did sign up and get a course, an online course with the fantastic painter Joseph Todorovic. So I think it was 10 weeks long, and it was like 3 hours a week. We'd show up online and we'd paint, and then he'd give us some feedback, and we'd go through like that. And it was split up into 2 paintings really, off like 5 weeks each, starting with like the composition sketch all the way through to doing the finish. And the first painting went pretty well. Showed up, did all the work, got the feedback each week. It was really useful feedback. He's a fantastic teacher. Definitely get some training with him if you can. And it was all going pretty well. And then the second painting rolled around, and I did my little composition painting sketch, sent in for feedback. And what was initially very cool was that he got on that week and he was like, do you know what? One of you guys did some great composition sketches, and one of you guys actually did one that was better than mine. And I was like, oh shit, who was that? And then he pulls up my painting, and that felt awesome, because he's like one of my favorite painters alive, and he was like, oh, this was better than mine. I was like, that's so cool. I was really inspired by that and just kind of felt really good about that. And I was really excited to then go and turn that into a finished painting. But here's the thing. Because at this point I was such a perfectionist, I couldn't even sit to do the painting. I worked so much on that second painting, yet I don't even think I submitted it any of the other weeks for feedback. I would turn up on the call, watch the feedback, watch everyone else's critiques, and I wouldn't submit mine, even though I'd done the work, even though I ended up finishing the painting, just because I was so afraid of it not being good enough that I didn't get the feedback that I showed up and paid for, which is insane. And at the end, after I'd done and I finished it, I'd actually destroyed it, so I couldn't even get the chance of sending it to him afterwards to get some feedback after the course was over, which he would have definitely done, because he's like a really good dude. So that was really kind of concerning, and it was also the start of this period where I really started to destroy my work. I would get so kind of like emotionally hurt and frustrated by it that I would destroy it and start again. Now, there were still times in this period where like this kind of like mode, this perfectionism would just be switched off, and I would paint and it would be incredible and I'd absolutely love it. But more and more those started to just disappear, and I started to spend more of this time in this very frustrated, very anxious, very painful, to be honest, mode where I was just making a bunch of mistakes, getting frustrated and destroying stuff. And this was really when things were starting to go downhill for me a lot. And I found out about this awesome challenge, the 100 Heads challenge. Now there's a new one or a newer one that's floated around a little while ago, where you do kind of like 100 head sketches over the course of a few days. This wasn't that one. This was an earlier one where the idea was you would do kind of one like finished not a sketch, like a finished painting or a finished drawing off a head every day for 100 days. And I love the artists that were involved that started this, a group called 404 Taken, if I remember correctly. They were all awesome. They were really kind of like welcoming to people who joined the challenge. There was a lot of kind of like online chat about it, and I really loved the idea, and I decided to jump in and do it as well. And I thought to myself, this is a really good way to just kind of like get over what's going on here. I was still really terrified to share my stuff, but I was like, do you know what, this is gonna, like, the trial by fire, this is gonna get you through it. And while I absolutely love everything about that challenge and the artists involved, to me this was an absolute disaster. It was so horrible. For the first like couple of weeks or 2-3 weeks, I managed to do it every day, but even within those, the days were absolutely awful. Basically what happened was I would wake up, start painting, make a mistake, scrub it back, start again, repeat, and I just do this all day until I kind of just managed to like endure the painting process long enough to get to the point where I had something postable, and then I would share it. And while there are some stuff that I kind of like from there, I'll put some up on screen. This had a really negative effect on me, and by a few weeks in, I wasn't even able to keep up with the daily sort of uploads off. I would still keep involved with the challenge, but I wasn't doing it. I wasn't sharing work every day, even though I was showing up and working like 12 hours a day, by the way. I was just destroying all of it. And I can't remember where, but somewhere either before I start the challenge or during or in the early days, somewhere in this period as well, things got even worse. I started to actually get panic attacks as well when I would paint. So now my days look like wake up, paint, make a mistake, have a panic attack, destroy the painting, start a new one, make a mistake, have a panic attack, start again, and just looping like this for months. And it was really exhausting and awful and shit. It wasn't good. It was not fun. And there was one day I remember I'd been like just in this cycle all day, and I just sat down on my bed at the end of the day, and there was just a wiped out painting on the canvas, and I was just like, I used to absolutely love this, and now I'm just fucking miserable. And at that point, I didn't decide to like quit immediately, but I definitely just kind of stopped showing up. I stopped showing up every day, and over the course of like a few months, I just sort of quietly quit and quietly stopped. And I didn't pick up the brushes again for 2 years. I just kind of went off and did other things. My dad, who was a consultant, he kind of saw that I was just kind of lost and struggling, so he like kind of hired me as like an assistant kind of thing. I started doing some like freelance marketing stuff as well. And I was really just lost for a couple of years. I had some fun, drank a lot during those couple of years. I had some like fun nights, but ultimately I was pretty lost during this period. And then something happened that we're all familiar with. The world got turned upside down when COVID started in 2020. And I was living with my girlfriend at the time, and with nothing to do, one day I sat down for a few hours to paint, and in just like 3 hours I painted this thing, and I was like, holy shit, I actually really like that. And it was such a fun day, because there was just none of that bullshit was there. I was just painting and I was enjoying it. There was no expectations, and I was like, damn, I gotta do this again. So we ended up moving in with a couple of friends of ours, another couple, and they're both artists, and they were, at this time, they weren't full-time, they weren't professionals yet, and we kind of decided that we were going to all kind of like chase our artistic dreams together. So during COVID, we moved in, we set up a studio together, and we like were just each other's like motivational partners. We all just like went all in, we were working all the time. It was a fantastic period, and over the course of the next year, I grew 20,000 followers on TikTok, started getting commissions, and things really started to go. But before I could do any of that, right when we moved in together, I knew that I had to get over this perfectionism. I had to get over this if I was actually going to pursue this properly. Now, before we get into how I kind of got over my perfectionism, I want to just stop and say something about that story, because I want to share that for a very specific reason, and it's this, which is during basically all of that time, I had this idea in my head that the perfectionism and the insecurity and all this stuff, to me, I had made this seem like a good thing. In my mind, I was like, do you know what? The reason why I get better and the reason that I'm improving and all this stuff is because I'm a perfectionist. It's because I care so much. It's because I give so much to it. This is why I'm improving. And I think this little belief can just fuck you up so much, because the thing that's actually getting in your way and holding you back is the thing that you think is making the progress happen when it's not. And it's a really insidious one, and I see this come up with a lot of people, even people who are really good at what they do and very successful with it. Often they'll be like, you know what, the reason I'm good is because I beat myself up about it all the time, as if that's the part that makes it work, as if that's the part that causes the results. That's not the part that causes the results. You can have a very healthy relationship with what you do and improve and notice where things are wrong without beating yourself up about it. So I just wanted to point that out, which is, if you're one of those people who thinks that being a perfectionist is good and beating yourself up is good, if I was you, I'd take a look at that, because it could get a lot worse and it could end up in a situation like mine, which, for God's sakes, I was having panic attacks over a painting. It's a bit ridiculous. And trust me, as someone who's gotten over this now, you are so much better and will produce so much better work, so much more you can explore and do. There's so much more freedom in letting this go rather than clinging to it and thinking that this is actually helping you out. In my opinion, it's really just not. Alright, so now let's get into how I actually started to get over this perfectionism. Now, everything here is all just, my experience, so take all with a pinch of salt, but let's get stuck into the first part, which is understanding just what was going on here, because if we don't know what's going wrong, we can't fix it. So I spent a lot of time just thinking about the times when it was easy. So when I painted this one right here and other key paintings over the years, and those days where everything just flowed, I was like, what's going on here? Because if I could just be like that all the time, damn, this would be so good. So I started to think about what's the difference? What happens on these days? And I started to notice this kind of thread between all of them, which was that on the days where things went good, I would just show up and I wouldn't really be that invested in it. I'd be very focused on what I was doing, but I wouldn't be thinking about the result at all. I'd just be kind of very light, very kind of loose with it, and there would be no real worry or concern. If I made a mistake, I was like, all right, made that mistake, just move that over here, fix that. And it was all just kind of with a light touch, I think is the best way that I can describe it. It was all very playful and very light and very pleasant. And then on the other days when I would show up, it was like my life depended on the painting going well. And it was like if I made a mistake, I would feel it as if I'd made a mistake. So there was something wrong with me, not with the painting, but with me as a person, and this would just build and build more mistakes. I made the worse it got. Everything was felt so severe in a way. It sounds mental to say it now, but that's really what it was like. And as I was reading about this, it reminded me of something from Stephen Pressfield's fantastic book, The War of Art. And in there he talks about the difference between an amateur and a pro. And he talks about amateurs being people who basically they over-identify with what they do. They kind of tie their self-worth into what they create. And because of this, they're always kind of seeking approval and validation and self-worth through it. Where the pro has distance from their work. They understand it's an expression of them, but they know it's not them. And because they have this distance, they can take risks and focus on the process and get feedback and put things out there and just have much more room to create and play, because they understand this is something they're creating, but it's not them. There's a healthy relationship, there's a healthy gap that lets them explore and play. And this trap, this kind of trap with the amateur mindset is really what I'd fallen into. I'd basically become so extremely identified with painting that if something was going wrong with the painting, it meant there was something going wrong with me. And when I clocked this, I thought, okay, now I have something to work with here. I know that what I need to do is start to create this distance so I can have this gap and have this sense of lightness and playfulness and not be over invested in what I'm doing. But how do you create that gap? How do you create that distance? So I knew that if I needed to create this distance, I needed to change what I was focused on. And the first thing you need to do if you're struggling with perfectionism, and what I did, was you need to stop and drop all ideas about creating something even remotely good. You need to be okay and actually make it the goal to show up and do something that's absolutely terrible. Because if you're struggling, you need to just focus on actually getting used to being comfortable with the process and remove any expectation of the result being good. So what I would do is I would focus on showing up and painting for 30 minutes to an hour. And all I was really focused on during this time was just showing up and putting the time in. There was no expectation of anything else. But in particular, what I was doing was I was paying attention to the stories I was telling myself as I was painting, especially when it came to things like making mistakes. So when my mental talk started to get negative, I started to feel myself get sucked into this kind of like perfectionist mode and things started to feel bad, I would just notice this and kind of refocus my attention back on the painting. If it was too much for me to kind of like deal with, I would stop, get up, go for a break, and remind myself that the entire point of doing this was just to get comfortable with the painting process again. And in the beginning, this was really challenging. Sometimes I could only show up and paint for literally 2 to 5 minutes before I had to stop and like go away because I was on the verge of having a panic attack. But as I continued to do this and show up and just focus purely on sitting down, painting for a little bit and really noticing all of these kind of negative emotions come up and not get sucked into them, to have that kind of space and just refocus back on what I was doing. Over time, as I continued to do this, they became less and less, and when they did come up, it was easier to just have this gap, have this distance, and let them drift by. And as this happened, funnily enough, as I had more and more distance and these started to affect me less and less, it meant I had more energy to actually focus on the process, focus on the painting. So my paintings got better as well, and I was enjoying them more. And this took place over a few months. It started very slowly, but having this time set out with the sole purpose was just to kind of change the way I was approaching painting and get comfortable with that process was massively helpful. And so many things started to change. Like even the way paintings that didn't work, the way I viewed them started to change as well. And they went from things that were just kind of isolated failures to kind of stepping stones on the path towards better ideas and better painting. So nothing felt wasted, nothing felt meaningless. It all felt like part of this journey that I was walking, and everything became much more exciting. Now, one thing that helped out massively was meditation. So meditation is basically just practicing this on its own, having some distance between yourself and your thoughts and becoming less reactive. There's loads of different forms of meditation out there. If you're struggling with this, I highly recommend learning and practicing one, or you can download my free guide on becoming aware, which is more about how you take things from meditation and sort of fold into your day-to-day so that you're less reactive, more present, enjoy things more. So you can check that out if you want. So at this point, my perfectionism had become what I would say pretty manageable. The panic attacks were a thing of the past, which felt amazing, and I was able to kind of put my work out there online and share it as well, and without kind of any real, a little bit of fear, but nothing major. And I would just do the same thing with posting as I did with painting. I would post and I would just pay attention to those reactions and just kind of let them go by, making the sole purpose just to post, not to get a result. And if you're somebody who feels you get sucked into being a perfectionist, I highly recommend taking some time and making the sole purpose to kind of address just your own process and getting comfortable with it and detaching yourself from that, over-identifying and the result. And this will make your life so much easier, so much more enjoyable. So I was pretty thrilled with the process that I'd made, but there was still, I don't really know how to describe it. I still felt kind of constricted in a way. I could feel that there was things that I wasn't doing, things that I wasn't sharing, because of like not really so much perfectionism anymore, but more just insecurity. And I felt kind of like being a bit of a straitjacket, even though I was very kind of like functional and I could have, just kept there and stayed there and it would have worked fine. There was still something not quite right. And then one day I was sitting down having a chat with Brady and Sarah, the people who I was in the art house with, and we were talking about this idea. And I had this mindset shift that completely changed the game for me. Now this has fundamentally changed the way I create, the way I think, and it's improved my life tremendously. I've got absolutely no idea how I'm going to explain it, but I'm going to give it a shot. So bear with me. Alright, so I want you to imagine we've got this tapestry. And it's a tapestry with all the art that's ever been created on it. And it stretches back from where we are now, all the way back to those first paintings and cave drawings. And everything's on there. And things are of different size as well. So you've got the Mona Lisa is pretty big on there, and artists like Picasso are big on there, and others like ones Botticelli, all these other artists, they're all taking quite big spaces on that tapestry. But everything's on there, from every sketch made by someone that you've never heard of to every single famous artist that exists, they're all on there. And what I realized when I kind of thought about this was I was kind of off to the side. And I was looking at this tapestry and seeing all of this art created there. And I was kind of coming from this place of thinking, how do I fit into all of this? And does my work even matter? It seems so insignificant. And how can I make it matter? And how can I, get more people to pay attention to my stuff? And how can I be good enough to take up a big enough space on that tapestry? And, how can I make an impact on this? And I was all kind of coming from this place of looking and trying to get in and in some ways make it about me. Really what I was doing was looking at this and kind of thinking, how can I matter? How can I matter in this massive tapestry of art? And as we were having this conversation about the tapestry with Brady, Sarah and I, we started to talk about this idea that actually none of that art exists in isolation. When we think about artists, say we think about like a Rembrandt, we tend to think of them just as a individual and think of everything that they did on their own. But the thing is, none of it actually exists. None of it exists in isolation. Like everything that we do and every bit of art that's ever been created is building off what came before it. And as much as we like to try and take things and say that we did it, like for example, there's a big thing about being self-taught. Really, there's nobody self-taught, and there's nobody who completely did something by themselves. For example, I would say I would be what most people called self-taught, but I would say it was more like self-motivated, because I still watched loads of YouTube tutorials and learned from other art that I saw. Every bit of art that I saw along the journey had an impact, and so many people that I spoke to along the way had an impact. So while I put in the work, if that hadn't been there, I wouldn't be able to do any of this. And this is the same for you as well. If you can even draw a cube in perspective, it's not just you. There was people out there who spent hundreds if not thousands of years figuring out how to just draw a cube in perspective. We are completely linked to those people who spent the time figuring that out. We're not separate from it. But here's the thing, the tapestry isn't just made up of those few key people who figured those kind of big things out. It's made up of everyone, and everyone who ever created anything, because they all still had an impact. They all still worked together to create that larger whole. They're basically all these individual threads that come together to make up the entire tapestry, and even if you remove one single thread, that whole tapestry starts to change. And when I thought about this kind of idea of it being this kind of like thing that everyone is contributing to and that everyone plays a part in, my perspective started to shift. And rather than looking at it and thinking like, how can I matter in this tapestry, I started to look at it and think, how can I contribute to this? How can I, what can I do? What can I bring? What's inspired me? What have I found beautiful? What have I found meaningful? And how can I add those to the tapestry? And how can I add those to the greater whole? Rather than try and dominate it with my ideas so I can get affection or be told I'm enough or anything like that. And really what happened was the kind of core motivation and the core intention behind creating changed. It went from me trying to ultimately get something from it to a more, I want to give something to it. And when I noticed this and when I made this shift, all my kind of perfectionism and insecurity just kind of went away. And I went from this place of really being pretty fearful, like really fearful looking back actually, even after I'd sort of overcome perfectionism, still in this very fearful mode, very afraid to do things, to a place where I just felt genuinely excited to create and to put things out and to share it, because I know it's about adding something to it. And if I get something, that's great, but that's not the point. And when you have that perspective, it's like this big kind of, it's basically the freedom to do and to create and to contribute, and that feels amazing. I don't know if this is making any sense to any of you. I hope it is. But this really did just change it all for me. And while I might get the odd bit of insecurity and even a little bit of perfectionism here and there, all I have to do is remind myself of this whole idea of the tapestry and just being this one little thread in there that's playing their part and contributing to the greater whole, and having that privilege to be a part of this massive thing that we all get to be involved in and all get to benefit from. So if you're out there and you're struggling with perfectionism, you're struggling with insecurity, the best advice I can give you is to be the thread, not the tapestry.